Hello, Spookaroos. It is your host, Eric D., presenting you with another remixed episode. This one is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, a.k.a. The Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman is a little bit catchier of a name because people, want to... That's intriguing, isn't it? A Headless Horseman. You want to learn more about that. So we're going to. But, of course, since this is an old episode, it's got all of our old tags on it, so I'm here to update those. So if you want to find us online, you can still find us at spookyas.com, and you can also find almost each and every episode, including the ones no longer listed on your favorite podcast streaming service, possibly. And you can also find links to our social media. We are now, this is new, pay attention, this is new, on Instagram at Spooky Times with Eric D. So if you're still following the old Instagram account, stop doing that and switch on over to Spooky Times with Eric D. And you can also find us on Facebook at Spooky Times with Eric D. That's our Facebook page, facebook.com/Spooky Times with Eric D. And you can also join the Spookaroos there, our closed group where we can talk about the Headless Horseman till our hearts are content without the weight of public judgment upon us. I think that this is a good episode. It features my hobgoblin, Jennie Blades. I'm going to skip over the intro, so you're just going to hear us talking because, in the intro I go into all the stuff that I just mentioned, only it's outdated, so now you got the new stuff, you don't need it anymore. This is a good episode. I think I'd only been to Sleepy Hollow, the real town, once when I recorded this episode, but now I've been there. I go almost every year. There might have been a year or two I skipped since then, but this episode was recorded back in 2016, and or 2015 or 2016, one of those two. 2016, I think. And I've gone every year, including that year since. So several years now. And I've done several trips there, and I've learned all about it. I've met some of the people down there. If you go to my Witchfinder Instagram account, you'll see a lot of them are listed over there. There's a lot of crossover between Sleepy Hollow and Salem and all that kind of stuff. And I think this is a fun, informative episode. I will do an update episode down the line about the town of Sleepy Hollow itself and all the fun things that you can do there around Halloween time, and we'll just have that to look forward to. But in the meantime, enjoy this classic episode of the show that is now Spooky Times with Eric D. Tonight, we are going to talk about the legend of Sleepy Hollow, which of course is the Headless Horseman. Mm-hmm. I'm sure most people are familiar, but we will get into the plot a little bit. We're mostly going to talk about the original short story, the Washington Irving story, but we'll also get into some of the other versions that have come around, like the Tim Burton one, which I know I'm supposed to love, but I don't. I don't hate it with a passion or anything, but I saw it once or twice and I was like, yeah, I'm good.
It's not accurate.
That's enough.
Yeah.
No, well, we'll get into all that later on. But what's new with you? Anything exciting? Anything spooky related?
I don't think so. I did have a shadow person experience today.
Yeah?
Creeped me out. Yeah.
What was that?
I was walking upstairs and something flew by the bathroom and I thought, Shadow People episode. Oh my God.
There you go.
Creeped me out.
Trans-dimensional beings.
Mm-hmm.
I fell asleep last night watching, sometimes I just put on YouTube and I'll just fall asleep while YouTube is playing. And I was watching some documentary about UFOs or something.
Oh my gosh, I can't stand aliens. They freak me out.
Yeah. Well, when I woke up, what was playing, because, YouTube will just play the next thing automatically.
Yeah.
It was still a documentary about aliens, kinda, but it was a documentary about how aliens are really demons, and we're all being deceived into believing, ancient alien technology, like all those kind of shows about how aliens built the pyramids.
Right.
They're basically saying, like, yes, actually, that's true, but the aliens weren't aliens, they're demons. And
there's
all this technology
motive.
Has been given to us by the devil and all this stuff. And one of these days we're going to do an episode about that. One of these days I'm going to do an episode about how, according to these people, I would be, if not a demon myself.
Why is that? You're an
because
alien?
because I'm spreading.
Oh,
Yeah, all this, occultic,
gotcha.
as they would say.
You ever watch Supernatural?
No.
They did an episode where they basically said that aliens were fairies because the fairies had to come back and like reinvent themselves to the modern people so that they would be hidden again, and they came down as aliens. And I was like, I'm okay with fairies as aliens. Aliens as aliens? No.
Yeah. None of this has anything to do with Sleepy Hollow, so why don't we get into that?
Okay.
Now, Sleepy Hollow is a short story, originally, by Washington Irving, first published as part of the book The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent. And it was first published in 1820. It is considered a work of speculative fiction. Now, I didn't know what speculative fiction meant.
No, me neither.
So I looked that up. Because, you know, being the Hollywood type that I am in show business, I know what a spec script is and all that. But I was like, what does that mean? Speculative script fiction. Because basically, as I was researching this, I know it's not like a true story in the sense of like Ichabod Crane, but I wondered if the legend of the Headless Horseman was real. And I thought maybe that's what speculative fiction meant. Like they were speculating on like, you know, these things are based on true things, but not quite like, you know. But actually that's not what it means. What it means is that it's a short story with like a supernatural theme. Like Spectre.
Oh,
related.
there you have it.
Right.
Now I got it.
I think that's...
I'm on now.
Yeah, where it comes from. Not positive, but that would make sense.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the plot of the story, basically, you have this small town, which is really called Tarrytown, but because of the idle nature of a lot of its inhabitants and the kind of dreamy... basically, they say like kind of a dreamy spell is cast over anyone who enters the town, and it's kind of like walking through a dream, so it became known as Sleepy Hollow. It's a farming community. But into it walks a Yankee from Connecticut, Ichabod Crane.
Dun dun dun.
Now, he is described as being a really unusual-looking guy. I think Irving describes him basically like a scarecrow with a very large nose and feet that look like shovels. So if you've ever seen the Disney cartoon version of it, I think they did a really good job illustrating what Irving says the schoolmaster would look like. But of course, in real life, he wouldn't look quite like that, because that would be far too bizarre.
There's some tall, lanky people out there.
Yeah. So Ichabod comes to town to be the schoolmaster. And in the tradition of the time, the schoolmaster lives with the families of the students. So like he'll stay with one family for a month, then he goes and stays with another family, and he's got his little schoolhouse. And some of the things about Ichabod are he considers himself to be like super intelligent, and he's always like ready to drop knowledge on people, whether he actually knows what he's talking about or not. And he's also very superstitious. And he believes in demons and witches and all that kind of jazz. But he also isn't afraid of them, he says, because he knows how to deal with them, because he's read Cotton Mather's book against witchcraft and demons, and he knows all the protections and how to protect himself. So, much like me, he's a man after my own heart as far as wanting to hear ghost stories, but where we differ is that he believes in all this stuff, and he's very much afraid of them, even though he says he's not.
Have you read Cotton Mather's books? You could
I have read parts of them. I haven't done...
from the ghosts?
Yeah, I haven't read the whole thing. I actually do have it.
Cool.
And I also have The Hammer Against Witches and so the other books too, so I'll get to them.
Nice.
Yeah, there'll be episodes about them. Maybe that's it. I just haven't read enough. If I only read enough, I would believe, but be prepared to do battle with supernatural forces.
Sweet.
Yeah. So while he's in town, Ichabod comes across Baltus Van Tassel, who's the wealthiest farmer in the town. And he has a lush estate, and he also has a beautiful and single 18-year-old daughter named Katrina, which is a name I've heard a few times in real life, but not too often, and I think that's a pretty name, actually.
I only know one Katrina.
I know two. But the second one I met didn't like to be called Katrina. I forget. She liked to be called something else.
No, weird.
And then when I found out what her real name was, I was like, why don't you like your real name?
Some people don't like their real names.
She said I could call her Katrina.
Now, Ichabod, on the other hand, I would totally change my name.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to his name later on, too, because that's kind of an interesting story. But anyway, he meets Katrina, and depending on the version you hear, there's different reasons as to why he's into Katrina. But in the original story, he's not even really into her. He's only into her because that's Baltus's daughter. And if he marries Baltus's daughter, he'll get Baltus's estate.
Gold digger.
Yeah, essentially. She did also happen to be the prettiest lady in town, but that didn't really enter into it. So he decides he's going to try to impress her by being worldly, as opposed to all the country bumpkins that she knows, with using his Yankee ingenuity. Problem is, there's already a young man in town who has his eyes on Katrina and who's been courting her for a long time. Abraham Van Brunt, better known to us as Brom Bones, which is a pretty badass nickname.
That is a pretty good nickname.
Yeah.
Not as good as Blades, but we'll go for it.
Yeah, well, Brom in most depictions is kind of an asshole. In the original cartoon version that Disney did in 1949, he actually looks a lot like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, he does, yeah.
And basically acts a lot like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Like, he's kind of the jerk jock who's, just messing with Ichabod. And he kind of is like that in the story, but the story also goes to great lengths to say that the town loved Brom Bones, and he was kind of a hero of the town. And, yeah, he was up to mischief, but it was always kind of like, even when he was rough and rowdy, it was kind of good-natured. And people were just kind of like, oh, there goes Brom and his boys, tearing up the town again. Crazy bunch of guys. But everybody liked him. So that's one of the big differences, I think, that you find in the variations. He's not quite the villain that he's made out to be. In fact, really, Ichabod is kind of the villain of the story, because his motives aren't pure at any time. And he's very, he thinks very highly of himself. He's very, cocky. Snobbish.
Yeah.
And he keeps looking down on the town. Yeah, he's kind of, who he reminds me of a little bit, if he was a little bit meaner, is like Niles Crane from Frasier.
Oh, yeah. Do you think Niles was mean, though?
No, that's what I'm saying, if Niles was meaner.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, you were thinking I meant the other way around. Yeah. No, but I think like that attitude and that kind of prissiness, if he was meaner, then yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, Brom Bones starts playing pranks on Ichabod with the help of his townsfolk. His
little crony group.
Yeah, he's got a little group of boys. And, for example, they turned over all the furniture in the schoolhouse at night. And then when Ichabod came back to the schoolhouse, he assumed that ghosts and demons and goblins had done it. So he started putting up, protections all over the schoolhouse. And the town kind of looked at him funny, but he was like, no, this is what, the books say you're supposed to do. Cotton Mather, this,
Get the salt.
Yeah. So they all have a good laugh and, that kind of thing. But Brom's just basically trying to make him look foolish. But Katrina keeps hanging out with him. And also he becomes like the choir master for the church. Because he sings very loudly. Doesn't say he sings well. Sings very loudly. And the reverend just kind of is like, yeah, just do whatever you want when he asks, he's like, just get out of here. But yeah, go ahead. Just to get rid of him. He's like, yeah, do whatever you want. If you want to sing, fine. So he gets all this alone time with the ladies, and that's part of, he would go and start courting Katrina. And again, in the story, Katrina does go, but it's made pretty clear that she's only going to make Brom jealous, because Brom has kind of like been taking it for granted that he's going to end up with Katrina, and she wants him to feel that there's a bit of a chase involved. Well, one night, Ichabod gets invited to the Van Tassel's house for a fall harvest party. And he thinks that this is going to be his big grand night. First of all, he like considers it like a special invitation to him, even though it's, you know, a town party.
Mm-hmm.
And he borrows a suit and he borrows a horse, and he decides he's going to propose to Katrina that night. So he's at the party, and, you know, he dances and he eats. The story talks about how much he eats a lot, too. He eats a lot, even though he's a tall, lanky guy. So he's not well-mannered. He's not well-liked in town. Like, people are just kind of making fun of him left and right, and the story makes fun of him. And then he eats a lot, and then he dances funny, and he sings loudly. Again, he's basically the villain of the story. Like, you're not really supposed to like Ichabod Crane, I don't think. And then they all get around to telling ghost stories. And several of the townspeople tell ghost stories. But, of course, Brom Bones has the best ghost story because he says that he has met the most famous ghost in all of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman.
Dun, dun, dun.
He claims that he himself has had a run-in with the Headless Horseman, and that he was afraid for his life. But basically, he got to the bridge by the old churchyard, and that was how, you know, he saved his life, because once the horseman crosses the bridge, he disappears in a big, you know, ball of fire.
Mm-hmm.
And Ichabod hears these stories, and gets kind of creeped out, but he puts them to the back of his mind, because he knows before the night is over, he's going to propose to Katrina. And he's certain she's going to say yes. And this is going to be all the splendor that he's been reveling in all night.
Mm-hmm.
The Baltus's farm is all going to be his. But he takes her out back, and in the story, they don't tell us exactly what happens. They just say when he comes back, he's crestfallen and heartbroken. And he's not the happy, dancing, eating guy anymore. So now he's got to go from the farm back to where he was staying, which was across town. And it's late at night, because he stayed late in the night to get Katrina alone.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on this old borrowed horse. And while he's out there, he passes by a spot where it's supposed to be a haunted tulip tree. And it's supposed to be haunted because a British spy was captured and hanged there.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's there, not too far away from him, he notices a fellow traveler. But the size of this traveler seems unusual. And he doesn't think too much of it at first until he notices that this fellow traveler is carrying his head in his hands. So now Ichabod says, "That's the fucking Headless Horseman." That's a direct quote. So he gallops off, trying to get to the bridge, because he knows the spirit can't cross the bridge. And then the spirit throws his head at him when he gets to the bridge. And Ichabod falls off his horse. And the spirit is heard laughing. And then the scene basically cuts in the story to the next morning. And there's no trace of Ichabod. All that's been found is his horse, which was wandering around alone without a saddle. But they did find Ichabod's saddle later on, and it had been trampled by horse feet. And they also found a smashed pumpkin by the bridge. And they don't say it outright, but they say that Brom Bones looked very knowing every time the story of the missing schoolmaster was told. Now, some people came back to town saying, "Oh, I saw Ichabod, you know, in New York, and you know, he's married to a wealthy woman, and they have lots of children, and he's doing fine." But the Dutch wives of Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, still insist to this day that he was carried off by the Headless Horseman. And that, in a nutshell, is a rather poor telling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
That was fairly good.
Thanks. I was trying to keep it
fairly
good. Concise.
Yeah.
I could have revved up the spookiness, I guess. That's one thing I'm not good at, like, being terribly spooky.
I gave you the backup noises.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So now we'll talk about the background of the story a little bit. Like I said, I was curious to find out if the story was based on an actual legend or not.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to tell. It seems like over time, fact has blended with fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be surprised if even the people of the actual town, well, now it's Sleepy Hollow, know exactly what the fact is and exactly what the fiction is. Because it seems like you get conflicting reports.
Yeah.
But to the best of what I could find, it's not based on an actual legend that existed. However, some of the names that appear in the story are actual people that either Irving knew or knew from the cemetery, which we'll get into. And the legend itself of the Headless Horseman, like forgetting Ichabod Crane, the Van Tassels and all that, but that legend itself may also be somewhat based on an actual myth that was around. The thing to keep in mind is that the story is set in the 1770s. So that's during the American Revolution. And in reality, after the Battle of White Plains in October of 1776, the town of Tarrytown was basically abandoned. Like all the towns around were kind of abandoned because they were taken over either by British or American troops.
Right.
And the troops wouldn't stay necessarily. They'd kind of travel in and out. And Tarrytown was right in between the front line, right in between the lines of the British side and the Patriot side. So skirmishes between the people of Tarrytown and the British soldiers,
Redcoats?
There you go. So skirmishes between the British soldiers and the Hessian mercenaries and the people of Tarrytown. Did I say that part already?
Yeah. Do people know what Hessian mercenaries are?
I'll get to that, yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Was not uncommon. But why don't you explain? You haven't talked much.
I think the Hessians, weren't they German troops that came? They were from Germany, and they came to fight. They helped the British. They were on the British side. Yeah. Basically.
They were like soldiers of fortune.
Yeah.
Like a whole country full of the A-team.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, that's what they were. If you can find them and you can pay them, perhaps you can hire the
Your
Hessians.
Own Hessians, yeah.
Well, so they would come in and raid farms in and around Tarrytown. And according to a story I read in the official book that you can buy at the Old Dutch Burial Ground, which is mentioned in the Irving story, but is also a real place. Actually, most of the places that he mentions in the story are real places. And if you go to if you go to the town Sleepy Hollow, which used to be Tarrytown, used to be North Tarrytown, but since I think I have it written down in my notes somewhere, and we'll get to it later, but I think since the 90s, it's been officially Sleepy Hollow. If you go there, you can see the actual sites that are mentioned in the story, which is pretty cool. But I went to the Old Dutch Burial Ground, and I got this little book about the burial ground, and it tells a story of the Van Tassel family, which is mentioned in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And it says that they resisted the British troops, because the British troops basically were coming to raid their house and take provisions. And they probably would have done it relatively peacefully, but the Van Tassels weren't about to let that happen. They weren't about to let these people come in and steal all their food and whatever equipment. So they opened fire on the troops. So the commander of the British troops said, burn the house, smoke them out, and we'll take them that way. So the mother of the family comes running out, but she falls down weeping and wants to go back into the house because she has left the baby inside. All the rest of the family members are out, but she runs back to the house but is overcome by smoke, and so she kind of collapses near the door. Now, a young Hessian comes to her and motions for her to follow him. So she follows him to a shed behind the house and sees the baby all wrapped up safe and sound. And the soldier allows the mother and the baby to escape, while the rest of the family is locked up and actually put in jail in New York for 1 year until they are traded for British prisoners. Now, this is one of the parts where I'm talking about fact and fiction get a little blurry. Because allegedly, there is a soldier who, much like in the story, a Hessian soldier, lost his head in a battle near or in Tarrytown. And according to things I've read online, it was the Van Tassel family who buried the soldier in this consecrated ground, even though he was an enemy soldier. And the theory on why that might have happened is because they had helped save the baby. Whether it was that exact soldier or if they were just saying, well, one of their kind did do us a solid, so let's at least be respectful to this headless corpse.
So why didn't Irving write about that story? I guess it's not as thrilling as an actual headless horseman.
Yeah.
But it's a good story, too.
Yeah. But we just don't know if that part is true. If that, the Van Tassel, first of all, there may or may not be a headless Hessian buried in that cemetery. And if there is, he may or may not have been put there by the Van Tassel family. I couldn't find any proof one way or the other about it. These Hessians were Jaegers. Did you know that?
Oh. Jägermeisters?
Well, Jaegers anyway.
Yeah,
which apparently means like a woodsman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A Jägermeister is the master hunter.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, and a Jaeger is hunter.
Yeah, so they
German.
were...
There's the German again.
Yep.
Yeah, eat some schnitzel.
Okay, so that is the background of the Van Tassel family and the Headless Horseman. Plus, if you go to the Old Dutch Burial Ground, you can find graves for, I think it's Katarina. It's not Katrina. I think it's Katarina Van Tassel. But you can find graves with these names on them. So he took a lot of names from the Old Dutch Burial Ground, and he did live in the town for a little while, so he might actually have known the families. It's possible. Who knows? Doesn't mention in anything that I read whether he actually knew the Van Tassels or not, but it's possible. One person he did know in real life, however, was Ichabod Crane.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't sound like he knew him all that well, because basically Irving was serving as an aide-de-camp, which basically means like assistant, to the governor of New York. And he was going around doing like troop inspections. And during one of these, he met Army Captain Ichabod Crane in 1814. Now, it's believed that, it's not believed, it's obviously, that's where he got the name for this character, Ichabod Crane. But it's not that the character is based on this guy in any way. But if you go to spookyasshit.com, you can see a picture of the real Ichabod Crane. The character itself is allegedly based on a man named Jesse Merwin, who was a real-life school teacher in Kinderhook, which is just a little bit further upstate in New York, along the Hudson River, where Irving had lived for several months in 1809.
I wonder why he used the other guy's name if it was nothing like him.
I think just as you stated kind of earlier, it's just such a name, like...
It's a cool name.
Well, cool maybe isn't the word, but it's an interesting...
Yeah.
It's not like Brom Bones, where you're like, oh, that's a sweet name. It's like Ichabod Crane.
What?
Yeah. And it turns out Ichabod is a religious name, by the way. It's from the Bible. Yes, Ichabod is a biblical name. And what's interesting about it is it comes from the Old Testament. Ichabod was the grandson of Eli and the son of Phineas, but in Hebrew, the name means no glory.
That's probably why you don't hear that name very often. It's not a very good meaning.
No. So I guess, again, that is another clue that you're not really supposed to like
really
Ichabod.
Supposed to like him. Not at all.
Yeah.
So the story is not really about the Headless Horseman. It's about a prank.
Yeah.
That happened.
Basically.
Game changer.
Pranking a Yankee. Now listen, that reminds me. I mentioned this earlier. But why is the New York team called the New York Yankees when New York is not a Yankee state?
That's a good question. I do know that the name was changed. It originally was the New York Highlanders.
Yeah.
And then it was changed to the New York Yankees. Kind of like the Red Sox were changed.
I'm mentioning this to Jennie Blades because she happens to be a Yankees fan.
I am never getting called back on the show. Ratings have just plummeted for my episodes.
Are you still though? Because your boyfriend is gone now.
I know. I still love him. He's okay. He'll be in the Hall of Fame soon. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Who's this again?
Derek Jeter.
Derek Jeter.
Love him.
See, I already forgot his name.
If you have him on the show, call me.
Yeah, I'll call him up.
DJ, what's up?
He seemed like a nice enough guy. He did a classy goodbye, so I respect that.
Yeah, he's a classy guy.
Yeah. All right. So now let's talk about some of the adaptations that we have seen. The one I want to talk about, I guess, mostly is the Disney one. But before that, the first filmed version that I was able to find any info on was simply called The Headless Horseman, and it was from 1922.
Oh.
It was a silent version.
I love silent films.
Starring Will Rogers as Ichabod Crane.
Well, it was right on the line.
Yeah.
Did you watch it?
No. I just found out about it, so we'll have to have a viewing party.
That sounds awesome.
And what's another interesting thing is it was actually filmed in the Hudson River Valley. So filmed on location.
On location.
Yeah.
Nice.
About 100 years after the fact. And then in 1949 came the Disney cartoon version.
Classic.
Which was paired with Mr. Toad, and originally it was The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And now they show it separately, and but and it's narrated completely by Bing Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple musical numbers in it. It's got a real catchy opening song. There's no spook, like a spook in Spurs.
I haven't watched it in years.
They don't like him, and he's really burned. So don't try and figure out a plan, because you can't reason with a headless man.
It's got a good point, too.
Yeah.
Meaning. Deep.
Yeah. And the opening line is, "Just gather round while I elucidate on what goes on outside when it gets late." And I didn't know what elucidate meant. I had to look it up. Yeah. It means explain.
Oh, there you go.
Essentially. It's a fancy word for explain.
Not as excited as Ichabod's meaning.
Yeah. So Brahms sings that, actually, when he's telling the ghost stories. But anyway. Despite it being a cartoon and all, it's actually a pretty faithful retelling of the story. Even Ichabod is like, they show him being a little bit sweeter than he was portrayed in the story.
He's kind of goofy. He comes out more goofy. Yeah,
but you could, he seems to be a little bit more good-hearted than he comes across in the story. But otherwise, it's pretty accurate, pretty faithful to the story. And aside from, Brahm also seems a little more villainous than he was. And then there's one that I think I might have seen it when I was a little kid. But in 1980, there was a version with Jeff Goldblum as Ichabod Crane.
Wow.
That was made for television.
Wow, I've only seen like 2.
Yeah, and I guess according to what they say here on Wikipedia, it's not very closely adapted from the original story, and it depicts Crane as being a skeptic regarding ghosts, as opposed to a true believer, which of course is also true in the Tim Burton movie, which we'll get to in a moment. Then there was an episode of one of my favorites when I was a kid, Shelley Duvall's Tall Tales and Legends.
Oh, yes.
She also did fairy tale theater, but she also
I remember that one.
much more shortly lived, did Tall Tales and Legends. And this one starred Ed Begley Jr. as Ichabod Crane. And I would imagine in his younger days he would make a good Ichabod Crane. Again, I think I've seen this one, actually. And Beverly D'Angelo as Katrina Van Tassel. And she was a looker back in her day, so I bet that's good, too. Although by 1985, I would have thought she was a little old for the part. Ed Begley Jr. probably was, too. I don't know how old everyone is exactly, but... Anyway, Shelley Duvall, those fairy tale theaters...
Those are great.
Classic. And creep, like, even the, like, the non-creepy ones were kind of creepy, just the way they were filmed.
Well, they all kind of have this... Anything from, like, the 80s and stuff, they all have this creepiness to it.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
I guess.
They're not like the movies and the shows that they have nowadays.
Yeah. All right, and now let's talk about the 1999 Tim Burton movie.
Your least favorite.
Sleepy Hollow. Well, I don't mean to hate on it too much, because it's not like I absolutely hated the movie. The first time I saw it, I was just really disappointed. Well, first of all, I don't like when they add like modern technology to old-timey shit. Now, this was before that I knew that that was a thing that had a name. And when I found out that it did have a name...
You're going to have to fill me in because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Steampunk.
Oh, well, yeah.
When they're using like hydraulic technology and stuff like before they would have
That's a huge thing now.
Yeah. I am not down for that in movies. As a style, it doesn't bother me as much, and I think some of the people are very creative, although I don't know why everyone needs goggles all the time. But in movies, I hate it.
Oh, because he's got his little
He's got gadgets all the time.
Well...
Yeah. It just bugged me.
I think that was just to show that he's like... I don't want to say an engineer, like a tinker.
It was the start of modern steampunk, I think.
That's fine.
I think that's where it started for a lot of people. They were like, oh, that's a cool, look. And then, I don't know much about the movement, so I'm probably going to get an email. No, you're wrong. Steampunk started back when, blah, blah, blah. I don't give a shit.
Well, come in and talk about it. How's that?
No, I don't want to talk about
steampunk?
it.
Oh, okay.
I'm totally fine if people want to dress up in steampunk. And like I said, aesthetically, some of it looks pretty cool. But just keep it out of the movies. I don't like it in the movies.
Gotcha.
It just bugs me. And also the fact that they did deviate a lot from the story, and it became this whole conspiracy thing, and there's a witch involved, and I haven't seen it in a long time. I think I own it. I'm pretty sure I do, but I haven't seen it in a long, long time.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff that they really did not have to dive into, but
yeah,
to make it into a movie, it's kind of a short story. I guess you have to add more, but...
Well, it's literally
like
a short
Walken.
story. But
I think he did a good job.
Christopher Walken was cool. Like, that part was cool. And I'm not a Johnny Depp hater, and I'm not even a Tim Burton hater. Ed Wood is one of my favorite movies. Even though it's a very quirky movie and it's not for everybody, it's one of my favorite movies. And Johnny Depp is actually a really good actor. And I even liked 21 Jump Street. Legitimately liked, and still do like, 21 Jump Street. But him and Tim Burton do sort of need to give it a rest. And stop making like the same kind of movies with the same kind of characters.
The same look.
Yeah.
It all has the same look.
Yeah. Ed Wood was really good though, and it doesn't look like
I haven't seen Ed Wood.
the other ones. It's good.
Yeah.
Again, it's a quirky, weird movie, as you might expect.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, he was a skeptic in that movie, and he's like, we're not gonna. And also, he was like a constable. He was like a policeman. There to investigate.
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. He did come
instead
in
of a school teacher.
So they knew already. They like called him in to investigate the whole situation.
Well, because people kept losing their heads.
But wasn't he under like the guise of a school teacher? I don't remember. It's been a long time ago.
Maybe we're not the right people to talk about this movie.
No, we shouldn't really.
I just remember that I didn't like it.
Christopher Walken was good.
Yeah.
But I
didn't like it all that much. If you like Tim Burton movies, go ahead and watch it. If you don't like Tim Burton movies, then definitely don't watch it.
It's one of those movies if it's on TV.
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
I wouldn't say it's a bad movie. I'm not saying that. But, As far as adaptations of Sleepy Hollow go, no, it's not my favorite. I also have a version. I think it was made in the mid to late 90s. The one I was watching when you came in.
Oh, the Hallmark one?
Yeah, it was a Hallmark Channel production.
Looks pretty good.
It was. It's pretty accurate to the story. And the guy that plays Ichabod is really good, actually. I think as far as real world people, he's captured the spirit of the original character the best. Some of the acting in it is kind of amateurish, and it's definitely not a big budget production. Not very splashy, but it is pretty good. And it's actually called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So, even unlike me, like this one isn't going to be called The Legend. This episode isn't going to be called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's going to be called The Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. So you see right away. You got to do little tricks like that.
Yeah.
Headless Horseman.
Scary.
That's going to get people more than...
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than Sleepy Hollow. Now, speaking of Sleepy Hollow, actually, the first time I tried to go to Sleepy Hollow, I sort of made a fool of myself.
Why?
Because there's a Sleepy Hollow in Concord, Massachusetts.
Oh my God, I love it. You went there first, didn't you?
When I was in high school, my ex, Ashley, who you know,
Oh, yes.
and I went to Concord for some reason, and it was like the first time we'd gone. And I was like, oh, we got to go to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery.
Oh, right. Sleepy House. Oh, now I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good place to go anyway. There's so much there.
But I was like, we got to go there because, that's where... Again, at the time, I wasn't like super familiar with the story. I just knew the basics, and it seems to be set like Concord could easily be a setting for the story. So it would make sense that it's in a small New England town. It's not. It's in a small New York town, and if you read the story, that's quite clear. They mention the Hudson River and the Knickerbocker and all, and stuff. It's very clearly supposed to be in New York State. But if you're just a teenager who vaguely remembers it and really thinks the Headless Horseman was a cool image, you go there. And you hear Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, you're like, oh, this must be the place that it was based on.
You should do an episode on Sleepy Hollow Cemetery.
Yeah, well, so we walked to one of the stores downtown and said, hey, how do you get to this Sleepy Hollow Cemetery? Like where... I forget exactly how we put it, but in some way we exposed our ignorance.
Oh, no.
And the woman behind the counter was like, oh, Sleepy Hollow's in New York. And I was like, what? She's like, well, there is Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, but it's got nothing to do with
Headless Horseman.
Headless Horseman. And she told me that Sleepy Hollow was a name given to a place where authors are buried in any cemetery. But I don't know if that's true, because I actually looked that up today to double check that.
Well, there's Author's Ridge.
There is Author's Ridge in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. But she was telling me that it was called Sleepy Hollow because the authors are buried there, and that any area where authors are buried in any cemetery, used to be known as a Sleepy Hollow. But I don't think that's true.
Fascinating.
It could be true,
I
don't think it is. Because Sleepy Hollow was the name before because Emerson mentioned Sleepy Hollow. He christened, I guess, the burial ground there. Mm-hmm. And it was called Sleepy Hollow Cemetery at that time. And now he's buried there along with Thoreau and
Alcott.
Louisa May Alcott and a bunch of other writers.
Hawthorne, I think.
Yeah, but all buried
in the same area. They're like neighbors.
Yeah, after him, I believe. Because I think he was the older one. But anyway, so I don't think that's right. But eventually, my brother and I used to go to New Jersey fairly often, and we have to pass through New York the way we used to go. And we'd always see signs for Sleepy Hollow. And one time on the way back, I was like, it was a nice spring day. It looked like the fall because it had just turned to spring. So like all the dead leaves are still out. They'd just been under the snow. So they were still there. It looked very fallish. And I said, we got time. Do you just want to like check out Sleepy Hollow while we're down here? Because my brother's kind of into that stuff too. And he was like, yeah, why not? It was only like 10 or 15 minutes out of our way. So we went. And like I said, you can actually visit the sites. So I did a little research and I found where everything was supposed to be. And they have bookstores and gift shops and all that kind of stuff. It actually looks a lot like Concord, Massachusetts. It's just a very nice...
They do readings of the story during like the fall and stuff.
Yeah, and they have like a Headless Horseman.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, they have like a Headless Horseman party at one of the like old mansion houses that you can go to. But even Headless Horseman aside, it's just a nice little town to visit. Again, if you go to spookyasshit.com, you can see my pictures from my trip a few years back. I'll post those up. Something that was a little confusing was that in the story it mentions that the horseman can't cross the bridge because he turns into a ball of fire.
Mm-hmm.
But the spot where Ichabod first encounters him, which is where the spy Commander Andre was captured and hanged, is on the like wrong side of the bridge then, because you have to go back over the bridge to get to the burial ground, which is where the Headless Horseman is supposed to like be buried.
End up, yeah.
He's supposed to like live, I guess. The original bridge is gone. Now it's like a 4-lane road, like a main street in the town. But there is a little plaque saying like this was the original site of the bridge. So I don't know. I guess the reason his powers ended maybe was because he went back to the grave at that point. Is that what they were trying to say?
The flames and all that happened.
He disappeared in a ball of flame.
But how is he brought to life? How is he summoned?
He just would go out nightly, it said, from midnight till dawn. So he would just go back to the scene of whatever the battle was where he lost his head.
Look at the time. Gotta get up. Gotta go.
Yep.
Get my coffee. Let's go.
Yeah. And then like in the Disney version, they just say like he just wants a head. He doesn't care whose it is. To quote the song exactly, black or white or even red. The Headless Horseman needs a head.
Mm-hmm.
And also if you go there, if you walk past the burial ground, up the road a bit, there's a reconstruction of the original bridge.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. Which I actually have a picture of hanging over my bed.
Cool.
I have very like country. You wouldn't know it was like the Headless Horseman bridge unless I told you.
That's very cool though.
But it's just very kind of like country-ish pictures that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have a picture of the Dutch church actually now that I mentioned it
You'll have to post them.
Yeah. All those pictures available. You'll know what's hanging over my bed. Ladies. And some gentlemen.
Whoa.
Well, it's not my fantasy, but if
Okay,
they want to
go.
fantasize, that's fine. I don't mind being a part of their fantasy. Yeah, so I'll post all those pictures, and I recommend that if you happen to pass through Sleepy Hollow, go ahead and check it out. They were having some kind of duck race the weekend after I was there, and I was so disappointed that I missed a duck race.
Duck race. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Cute.
They also have like a big sculpture, a really weird kind of metal sculpture of the horseman chasing Ichabod. Kind of in the center of town with a gift shop nearby.
No, I have to say, I think this spoiled my like Headless Horseman thing.
What do you mean?
From all the facts and all the information, I'm kind of like, the story's not even about the Headless Horseman.
Oh,
It was just a trick played on a cocky prick. Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it depends how much faith you put in ghost stories to begin with. To me, that doesn't ruin it because I didn't believe in ghosts anyway.
Oh.
But the image is still really cool.
It's a very
And
cool image,
it's
which I would
cool.
love to know where he came up with that idea.
Yeah, well, you had some theories, actually. Go ahead and talk about that because we were talking about that before the show.
Oh, well, yeah, because I just thought that's just such a unique image of a headless horseman to just choose out of the thin air, that it had to come from some idea someplace. And one of the things that I was thinking of was the Celtic doula. What's it called?
I think you were saying Doulahan?
Doulahan? Yeah. Which is this Celtic headless fairy or being that is kind of associated with the Grim Reaper. And
I don't know too much about it, but
it was kind of like he was like a warrior and he didn't have a head, and he would kind of like almost be like if he was going to come to see you like the Grim Reaper, you were basically done for.
yeah.
So I didn't know maybe if he got that idea from then because he was a warrior
Could
being
be.
on a horse during the time.
Could be.
And I forget the other thing that I was looking into. Oh, in medieval manuscripts, there's a lot of these like they're not so much headless, that they kind of have these
Nearly headless.
nearly headless. Yeah, they have their faces like in their chest.
Harry Potter
A
fans,
lot of
what's
these,
up?
yeah, a lot of these like sketches in medieval manuscripts have these beings, and they were kind of seen as like this not species, but this other being, and a lot of times they were kind of like a warrior, kind of fictitious.
Yeah, well,
group
so it seems like it's a fairly common idea.
to not have your head.
Yeah, in Western European folklore, and he did write the story while he was in England, so it's possible that those had some input. Unless, like I said, it's possible that there actually was a legend of the Headless Hessian in Sleepy Hollow, but it's just now the town is all about the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Hence, they've renamed the town Sleepy Hollow, and the high school's team is the Horsemen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so creepy. I love that.
It's even better than, I mean, the Salem is the witches.
I would love to see those two go head to head.
The witches versus the Horsemen. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Or Dover has the demons. That's pretty cool, too.
That's pretty neat.
But they make them, anyway. Yeah, so the town is
Not
definitely...
as cool than a clock, though. Gotta just say that.
Yeah, clockers. Go clockers. The town is really, like, bought into the whole Sleepy Hollow Headless Horseman mythology. Just go, check out the sites. Washington Irving was very descriptive about where everything happened and where it was. And you can visit most of these sites, and you can visit Irving's grave.
And it's a short read.
Yeah, it's a short story. It's a fairly long short story, but it's not that bad. I have a little Headless Horseman figurine, I guess you'd call it.
He's looking at us.
Yeah. I pulled him out tonight to be part of the show. But I brought that with me, because I'm super cool, to Sleepy Hollow. And so he's been to the actual sites. I have a picture of him on the bridge, and I have a picture of him with the old Dutch church sign. And
he crossed the bridge and didn't burst into flames?
Well, I kept him in my pocket for safekeeping at that point.
Good.
But yeah. I have a picture of him on both bridges. The real bridge, which is the modern bridge now, which doesn't look all that cool, and the old bridge.
Neat.
Well, the reconstruction bridge, which, by the way, was not a covered bridge. In a lot of depictions, it's like an old covered bridge.
Oh, it's just your basic bridge?
Yeah, it's just a regular old wooden bridge.
I think the covered bridge probably because it's creepy.
Yeah.
Dark inside. Make it spooky.
Yeah, you get an echo in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, anything else to say about Sleepy Hollow? I don't think I have well, the TV show, I guess we should mention because it's like on.
Oh, the TV show, yeah.
I've not seen a single episode, and I read a synopsis of what it was about, and it does not grab me. I guess Ichabod fell asleep for 250 years, and now he woke up, and now he's trying to solve murders.
I think this goes along with your modern technology and an old story thing, because basically
now it's an old story in modern tech.
It's
times.
an old character plunked into a modern day thing.
Yeah.
Not like Doctor Who. None of that. That's a good one. No, Ichabod like falls asleep, and then he wakes up, and it's current time, and he like meets up with a cop, and they kind of become like partners almost.
Huh.
And he kind of has to like adjust to modern time, obviously, but yet at the same time, the Headless Horseman has also come back. So I only watched a few of the first episodes because it did have the Headless Horseman and Ichabod and the time travel thing. I was like, oh, whatever, that's fine. But then after a while, it started to dive into other supernatural things. And then I was just like, no, if you're going to be Sleepy Hollow, focus on the Headless Horseman, and that's it. Don't just go into
too long.
Don't start picking
now
up
it's
vampires
like
and aliens and
it's X-Files with Ichabod Crane.
Yeah, and I was like, no, I'm good. So I haven't watched it since then.
And please, 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 wherever you listen to us, iTunes, Stitcher, we may or may not be on iHeartRadio by the time you hear this. Wherever you're hearing us, if you could please rate and review. Rate and review. Especially if you enjoy the show. I would really appreciate it. Because it turns out, I found out that it doesn't actually matter how many downloads you get. it's your ranking on iTunes anyway is more determined by your reviews and your ratings. And the more of those you have, the bigger push you get on iTunes, and the bigger push you get on iTunes, the more people will be exposed to it. And the more people that are exposed to it, the bigger the show can become.
And maybe we can get t-shirts.
And we can start making, products and stuff and doing live shows and all that kind of stuff. Trust me, I'm not looking at this thinking like, oh, this is going to be my ticket to the big time. If we just keep it a nice small podcast that people enjoy, that's totally fine with me. But I would like to do live shows and, have fun interacting with spooky-ass people like myself.
Nice.
And like Jennie Blades,
Does that make
Lissess,
me
by the way.
Too?
I don't know if I introduced you. What?
Am I spooky? Does that make me spooky too?
You're at least a little spooky.
Oh, okay.
You've been here 3 times.
This is true.
And I didn't have to drag you.
This is true.
So you can't act like you're Pollyanna.
I'm not spooky.
Yeah. Okay. Until next time. Don't be afraid.